It was apparently a very large canvas, but it was all rolled up, and so she couldn't see what other faces he had painted. What if this was a new opportunity? The man, she had decided that he was a man, not a boy, because otherwise she would start to feel old before her time. Didn't seem the sort likely to make that kind of proposal just in order to spend the night with her. 5 minutes later, as promised, he had finished his work, while Maria concentrated hard on thinking about Brazil, about her brilliant future there, and her complete lack of interest in meeting new people who might jeopardize all her plans. "Thanks, you can move now," said the painter to the chemist, who seemed to awaken from a dream. And turning to Maria, he said simply, "Sit in that corner and make yourself comfortable. The light is wonderful." As if everything had ordained by fate, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if she had known this man all her life or had already lived this moment in dreams and now knew what to do in reality, Maria picked up her glass of anisette, her bag, and the books on farm management and went over to the place indicated by the man, a table near the window. He brought his brushes, the large canvas, a series of small glass bottles full of various colors, and a packet of cigarettes, and knelt at her feet. "Now don't move." "That's asking a lot. My life is in constant motion." Maria thought she was being terribly witty, but the man ignored her remark, trying to appear natural because she found the way the man looked at her most discomforting. She pointed across the road at the plaque. "What is the road to Santiago?" "It's a pilgrimage road. In the Middle Ages, people from all over Europe would come along this street, heading for a city in Spain, Santiago de Compostela." He folded over one part of the canvas and prepared his brushes. Maria still didn't know quite what to do. "Do you mean that if I followed that street, I'd eventually get to Spain?" "Yes, in 2 or 3 months' time." "But can I just ask you a favor?" "Stop talking. It will only take about 10 minutes. And take that package off the table." "They're books," she said, slightly irritated by his authoritative tone. She wanted him to know that he was kneeling before a cultivated woman who spent her time in libraries, not shops. But he himself picked up the package and placed it unceremoniously on the floor. She had failed to impress him. Not, of course, that she was remotely interested in impressing him. She was off duty now and would save her seductive powers for later, for men who would pay handsomely for her efforts. Why bother striking up a relationship with a painter who might not even have enough money to buy her a coffee? A man of 30 shouldn't wear his hair so long. It looked ridiculous. Why did she assume he had no money? The waitress had said he was well known, or was it just the chemist who was famous? She studied his clothes, but that didn't help. Life had taught her that the men who took least care of their appearance, as with this painter, always seemed to have more money than the men in suits and ties. What am I doing thinking about this man? What interests me in this painting? 10 minutes of her time was not such a high price to pay for the chance of being immortalized in a painting. She saw that he was painting her alongside the prize-winning chemist, and she began to wonder if, after all, he would want some kind of payment. Turned towards the window. Again she obeyed, unquestioningly, which was not at all like her. She sat looking at the people passing by, at the plaque with the name of their road on it, thinking about how that road had been there for centuries, how it had survived progress and all the changes that had taken place in the world and in mankind. Perhaps it was a good omen. Perhaps that painting would share the same fate and still be on display in a museum in the city in 500 years' time. The man started drawing, and as the work progressed, she lost that initial sense of excitement and instead began to feel utterly insignificant. When she had gotten into the cafe, she had been a very confident woman, capable of making an extremely difficult decision, leaving a job that earned her lots of money, and taking up a still more difficult challenge, running a farm back in her own country. Now all her feelings of insecurity about the world seemed to have resurfaced, a luxury no prostitute can allow herself. She finally worked out why she was feeling so uncomfortable. For the first time in many months, someone was looking at her not as an object, not even as a woman, but as something she could not even comprehend. The closest she could come to putting it into words was, "He's seeing my soul, my fears, my fragility, my inability to deal with a world which I pretend to master, but about which I know nothing. Ridiculous, pure fantasy." "Please don't talk," said the man. "I can see your light now." No one had ever said anything like that to her before. "I can see your firm breasts. I can see your nicely rounded thighs. I can see you, the exotic beauty of the tropics. Or at most, I can see that you want to leave this life. Let me set you up in an apartment." She was used to comments like that, but her light? Did he mean the evening light? "Your personal light," he said, realizing that she didn't know what he was talking about. Her personal light. Well, how wrong could he be? That innocent painter, who obviously hadn't learned much about life in his 30-odd years, but then, as everyone knows, woman nature more quickly than men. And although Maria might not spend sleepless nights pondering her particular philosophical problems, she knew one thing she did not have, what that painter called light, and which she took to mean a special glow. She was just like everyone else. She endured her loneliness in silence, tried to justify everything she did, pretended to be strong when she was feeling weak, or weak when she was feeling strong. She had renounced love and taken up a dangerous profession, but now, as that work was coming to an end, she had plans for the future and regrets about the past. And someone like that doesn't have a special glow. That must just be his way of keeping her quiet and still unhappy to be there, playing the fool. Personal light? Indeed. He could have said something else like, "You've got a lovely profile." How does light enter a house? Through the open windows. How does light enter a person? Through the open door of love. And her door was definitely shut. He must be a terrible painter. He didn't understand anything. "I've finished," he said, and started collecting up his things. Maria didn't move. She felt like asking if she could see the painting, but that might seem rude, as if she didn't understand or trust what he had done. Curiosity, however, got the better of her. She asked, and he concurred. He had painted only her face. It looked like her, but if one day she had seen the painting, not knowing who the model was, she would have said that it was someone much stronger, someone full of a light she didn't see reflected in the mirror. My name's Ralph Hart. If you like, I can buy you another drink. No, thank you. It would seem that the encounter was now taking a sadly foreseeable turn. Man tries to seduce women. 2 more anisette, please, he said, ignoring Maria's answer. What else did she have to do? Read a boring book about farm management? Walk around the lake as she had hundreds of times before? Or talk to someone who had seen in her a light of which she knew nothing, and on the very date marked on the calendar as the beginning of the end of her experience? What do you do? That was the question she did not want to hear. The question that he had made her avoid other encounters when, for one reason or another, someone had approached her. Though, given the natural discretion of the Swiss, this happened only rarely. What possible answer could she give? I work in a nightclub. Right. An enormous load fell from her shoulders, and she was pleased with all that she had learned since she had arrived in Switzerland. Ask questions. Who are the Kurds? What is the road to Santiago? And answer, I work in a nightclub, without worrying about what other people might think. I have a feeling I've seen you before. Maria sensed that he wanted to take things further, and she savored her small victory. The painter who minutes before had been giving orders and had seemed so utterly sure of what he wanted, had now gone back to being a man like any other man, full of insecurity when confronted by a woman who didn't know. And what are those books? She showed them to him. Farm administration. The man seemed to grow even more insecure. Are you a sex worker? He had shown his cards. Was she dressed like a prostitute? Anyway, she needed to gain time. She was watching herself. This was beginning to prove an interesting game, and she had absolutely nothing to lose. Is that all men think about? He put the books back in the bag. Sex and farm management? How very dull. What? It was suddenly her turn to feel put on the spot. How dare he speak ill of her profession? He still didn't know exactly what she did, though he was just trying out a hunch, but she had given answer to him. Well, I can't think of anything duller than painting, a static thing, a movement frozen in time, a photograph that is never faithful to the original, a dead thing that is no longer of any interest to anyone, apart from painters, who are people who think they are important and cultivated, but who haven't evolved with the rest of the world. Have you ever heard of John Marrow? Well, I hadn't until an Arab in a restaurant mentioned the name. But knowing the name, she didn't change anything in life. She wondered if she had gone too far. But then the drinks arrived and the conversation was interrupted. They sat saying nothing for a while. Maria thought it was probably time to leave, and perhaps Ralph Hart thought the same. But before them stood those 2 glasses of that disgusting drink, and that was a reason for them to continue sitting there together. Why the book on farm management? What do you mean? I've been to Rue de Bourne. When you said you worked in a nightclub, I remembered that I'd seen you before in that very expensive place. I didn't think of it while I was painting, though. Your light was so strong. Maria felt the floor beneath her feet give way. For the first time, she felt ashamed of what she did. Even though she had no reason to, she was working to keep herself and her family. He was the one who should feel ashamed of going to Rue de Bourne. All the possible charm of that meeting had vanished. Listen, Mr. Hart, I may be a Brazilian, but I've lived in Switzerland for 9 months now. I've learned that the reason the Swiss are so discreet is because they live in a very small country where almost everyone knows everyone else, as we have just discovered, which is why no one asks what other people do. Your remark was both inappropriate and very rude. But if your aim was to humiliate me in order to make yourself feel better, you're wasting your time. Thanks for the anisette, which is disgusting, by the way, but which I will drink to the last drop. I will then smoke a cigarette, and finally, I'll get up and leave. But you can leave right now if you want. We can't have famous painters sitting at the same table as a prostitute. Because that's what I am, you see? A prostitute. I'm a prostitute through and through, from head to toe. And I don't care who knows. That's my one great virtue. I refuse to deceive myself for you, because it's not worth it. Because you don't merit a lie. Imagine if that famous chemist over there were to find out what I am. She began to speak more loudly. Yes, I am a prostitute. And do you know what? It sets me free, knowing that I'll be leaving this god-awful place in exactly 9 days' time, with loads of money, far better educated, capable of choosing a good bottle of wine, with my handbag stuffed with photographs of the snow, and knowing all there is to know about men. The waitress was listening, horrified. The chemist seemed not to notice. Perhaps it was just the alcohol talking, or the feeling that soon she would once more be a woman from the interior of Brazil. Or perhaps it was the sheer joy of being able to say what she did not and laugh at the shock reactions, the critical looks, the scandalized gestures. Do you understand, Mr. Hart? I'm a prostitute through and through, from head to toe, and that's my one great quality, my virtue. He said nothing. He didn't even move. Maria felt her confidence returning. And you, sir, are a painter with no understanding of your models. Perhaps the chemist sitting over there, dozing lost to the world, is really a railway worker. Perhaps none of the other people in your country or in your painting are what they seem. I can't understand otherwise how you could possibly say that you could see a special light in a woman who, as you discovered while you were painting, is nothing but a prostitute. These last words were spoken very slowly and loudly. The chemist woke up, and the waitress brought the bill. This has nothing to do with you as prostitute, but with you as woman. Ralph ignored the proffered bill and replied equally slowly but quietly. You have a glow about you, the light that comes from the sheer willpower, the light of someone who has made important sacrifices in the name of things she thinks are important. It's in your eyes. The light is in your eyes." Maria felt disarmed. He had not taken up her challenge. She had wanted to believe that he was simply trying to pick her up. She was not allowed to think, at least not for the next 9 days, that there were interesting men on the face of the earth. "You see that glass of anisette before you?" he went on. "Now you just see the anisette. I, on the other hand, because I need to be inside everything I do, see the plant it came from, the storms the plant endured, the hand that picked the grain, the voyage by ship from another land, the smells and colors with which the plant allowed itself to be imbued before it was placed in the alcohol. If I were to paint this scene, I would paint all those things, even though when you saw the painting, you would think you were looking at a simple glass of anisette. In just the same way, while you were gazing out at the street and thinking, because I know you were, about the road to Santiago, I painted your childhood, your adolescence, your lost, broken dreams, your dreams for the future, and your will, which is what most intrigues me. When you saw your portrait, Maria put up her guard, knowing that it would be very difficult to lower it again later on. I saw that light. Even though all that was before me was a woman who looked like you." Again, that constrained silence. Maria looked at her watch. "I have to go in a moment." "Why did you say that sex is boring?" "You should know that better than me." "I know because it's my job. I do the same thing every day, but you're a young man of 29. Young, attractive, famous, who should be interested in things like that, and who shouldn't have to go to Rue de Berne looking for company. Well, I did. I went to bed with a few of your colleagues, but not because I had any problem finding female company. The problem lies with me." Maria felt a pang of jealousy and was terrified. She really must leave. "It was my last try. I've given up now," said Rolf, starting to pick up the painting materials scattered on the floor. "Have you got some physical problem?" "No, I'm just not interested." This wasn't possible. "Pay the bill and let's go for a walk. I think a lot of people feel the same, but no one ever says so. It's good to talk to someone so honest." They set off along the road to Santiago, which first climbed and then descended down to the river, then to the lake, then on to the mountains, to end in some distant place in Spain. They passed people going back to work after lunch, mothers with their prams, tourists taking photographs of the splendid fountain in the middle of the lake, Muslim women in their headscarves, boys and girls out jogging, all of them pilgrims in search of that mythological city, Santiago de Compostela, which might not even exist, which might be a legend in which people need to believe in order to give meaning to their lives. Along this road walked by so many people over so many years went that man with long hair, carrying a heavy bag full of brushes, paints, canvas, and pencil, and that woman, slightly younger, with her bag full of books about farm management. It did not occur to either of them to ask why they were making that pilgrimage together. It was the most natural thing in the world. He knew everything about her, although she knew nothing about him. Which is why she decided to ask, now that her policy was always to ask. At first he reacted shyly, but she knew how to wheedle information out of men, and he ended up telling her that he had been married twice, a record for a 29-year-old. had traveled widely, met kings and queens and famous actors, been to unforgettable parties. He had been born in Geneva, but had lived in Madrid, Amsterdam, New York, and in a city in the south of France called Tabis, which wasn't on any of the usual tourist circuits, but which he loved because it was so close to the mountains and because its inhabitants were so warm-hearted. He had been discovered as an artist when he was only 20, when an important art dealer happened to visit a Japanese restaurant in Geneva decorated with his work. He had earned a lot of money. He was young and healthy. He could do anything, go anywhere, meet anyone he liked. He had known all the pleasures a man could know. He did what he most enjoyed doing, and yet, despite everything, fame, money, women, travel, he was unhappy and had only one joy in his life: his work. "Were you very hurt by women?" she asked, realizing at once what an idiotic question it was, straight out of some manual entitled "Everything Women Should Know If They Want to Get Their Men." "No, they never hurt me. I was very happy in both my marriages. I was unfaithful and so were they, just like any other normal couple. Then, after a while, I simply lost interest in sex. I still felt love, still needed company, but sex... But why are we talking about sex?" "Because, as you yourself said, I'm a prostitute. My life isn't very interesting, really. I'm an artist who found success very young, which is rare and even rarer in the world of painting. I could paint anything now and it would be worth of a fortune, which of course infuriates the critics because they think they are the only ones who know about art. Other people think I've got all the answers, and the less I say, the more intelligent they think I am." He went on talking about his life, how every week he was invited to something somewhere in the world. He had an agent who lived in Barcelona. Did she know where that was? Yes, Maria knew. It was in Spain. This agent dealt with everything to do with money, invitations, exhibitions, but never pressured him to do anything he didn't want to do. Now that, after years of work, there was a steady demand for his paintings. "Do you find my story interesting?" he asked, and his voice betrayed a touch of insecurity. "It's certainly an unusual one. Lots of people would like to be in your shoes." Ralph wanted to know about Maria. "Well, there are three of me, really, depending on who I am with. There's the innocent girl who gazes admiringly at the man pretending to be impressed by his tales of power and glory. Then there's the female fatale who pounces on the most insecure and by doing so takes control of the situation and relieves them of responsibility, because then they don't have to worry about anything. And finally, there's the understanding mother who looks after those in need of advice and who listens with an all-comprehending ear to stories that go in one ear and out the other. Which of three would you like to meet?" "You." Maria told him everything because she needed to. It was the first time she had done so since she left Brazil. She realized that despite her somewhat unconventional job, nothing very exciting had happened apart from that week in Rio and her first month in Switzerland. Otherwise, it had been home, work, and nothing else. When she finished speaking, they were sitting in another bar, this time on the other side of the city, far from the road to Santiago, each of them thinking about what fate had reserved for the other. "Did I leave anything out?" she asked. "How to say goodbye?" Yes, it had not been an afternoon like any other. She felt tense and anxious, for she had opened a door which she didn't know how to close now. "When can I see the whole painting?" Ralph gave her the card of his agent in Barcelona. "Phone her in about 6 months' time, if you're still in Europe. The Faces of Geneva, famous people, and an anonymous paper. It will be exhibited for the first time in a gallery in Berlin. Then it will tour Europe." Maria remembered her calendar, the 9 days that remained, and the dangers posed by any relationship, any bond. She thought, what is more important in life, living or pretending to live? Should I take a risk and say that this has been the loveliest afternoon I've spent in all time I've been here? Should I thank him for listening to me without criticism and without comment? Or should I simply don the armor of the woman with willpower, with the special light, and leave without saying anything? While they were walking along the road to Santiago, and while she was listening to herself telling him about her life, she had been a happy woman. She could content herself with that. It was enough of a gift from life. "I'll come and see you," said Rolf. "No, don't. I'll go be back to Brazil soon. We have nothing more to give each other." "I'll come and see you as a client." "That would be humiliating for me." "I'll come and see you so that you can save me." He had made that comment early on about his life of interest in sex. She wanted to tell him that she felt the same, but she stopped herself. She had said no too many times. It would be best to say nothing. How pathetic. There she was with the little boy again, only he wasn't asking her for a pencil now, just a little company. She looked at her own past, and for the first time she forgave herself. It hadn't been her fault, but the fault of that insecure little boy who had given up after she had attempted. They were children, and that's how children are. Neither she nor the boy had been in the wrong, and that gave her a great sense of relief, made her feel better. She hadn't betrayed the first opportunity that life had presented her with. We all do the same. It's part of the initiation of every human being in search of his or her other half. These things happen. Now, though, the situation was different. However, convincing her reasons, "I'm going back to Brazil, I work in a nightclub, we hardly know each other, I'm not interested in sex, I don't want anything to do with love, I don't need to learn how to manage a farm, I don't understand painting, we live in different worlds," life had thrown down a challenge. She wasn't a child anymore. She had to choose. She preferred to say nothing. She shook his hand, as was the custom there, and went home. If he was the man she wanted him to be, he would not be intimidated by her silence. Extract from Maria's diary written that same day. "Today, while we were walking around the lake, along that strange road to Santiago, the man who was with me, a painter with a life entirely different from mine, threw a pebble into the water. Small circles appeared where the pebble fell, which grew and grew until they touched a duck that happened to be passing and which had nothing to do with the pebble. Instead of being afraid of that unexpected wave, he decided to play with it. Some hours before that scene, I went into a cafe, heard a voice, and it was as if God had thrown a pebble into that place. The waves of energy touched both me and a man sitting in a corner painting a portrait. He felt the vibrations of that pebble, and so did I. So what now? The painter knows when he has found a model. The musician knows when his instrument is well tuned. Here in my diary, I'm aware that there are certain phrases which are not written by me, but by a woman full of light. I am that woman, though I refuse to accept. I could carry on like this, but I could also, like the duck on the lake, have fun and take pleasure in that sudden ripple that set the water rocking. There is a name for that pebble: passion. It can be used to describe the beauty of an earth-shaking meeting between two people. But it isn't just that. It's there in the excitement of the unexpected, the desire to do something with real fervor, and the certainty that one is going to realize a dream. Passion sends us signals that guide us through our lives, and it's up to me to interpret those signs. I would like to believe that I'm in love with someone I don't know and who didn't figure in my plans at all. All these months of self-control, of denying love, have had exactly the opposite result. I have let myself be swept away by the first person to treat me a little differently. It's just as well I don't have his phone number, that I don't know where he lives. That way I can lose him without having to blame myself for another missed opportunity. And if that is what happens, if I have already lost him, I will at least have gained one very happy day in my life. Considering the way the world is, one happy day is almost a miracle.